The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. We've reached out to all of the candidates running for mayor in the city of New York to invite them onto the program. Some have responded and appeared, and unfortunately, some have not. Tonight, we're pleased to present a Republican mayoral candidate, John Katz. To ensure maximum fairness in all of our mayoral appearances, we do not accept viewer phone calls. However, if you'd like to offer questions or comments on anything you hear on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, you send us an email at bronxtalk@hotmail.com or put them on the BronxTalk Facebook page, and we'll pass them along to the appropriate person and or read them on the air during a future edition of our program. For now, a hearty welcome to mayoral candidate John Katz. Sir, thank you for coming to BronxTalk.
How are you?
I'm just fine. Happy to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's just start with a basic political question about Republican politics. Do they work for this city, especially in the Bronx, where we don't have a single Republican in elected office, and policies opposing affirmative action, immigration reform, women's rights, and so on run counter to really what has defined the Bronx political scene for many years?
Well, let me describe myself. I am a pro-business Republican, that I believe that business has to do well in our city in order for people to do well. And I am pro-safety in our streets Republican, because I believe we have an obligation to keep our citizens safe. But I'm running also as a liberal, and a liberal is like a Democrat, and I believe that we have to take care of our elderly and deliver what we promised to them, and also that the kids in our poorer neighborhoods have to be given the hope that they can do what I did. I grew up on 135th Street. I grew up on 135th Street in Harlem, and I made it. I became successful. And we have to remind our kids, and I want to go to every neighborhood and tell them they can make it too. And look, I went to school in the Bronx. I went to parochial school. I went to PS 192 in Manhattan. I went to parochial school on Forest Avenue. Then I went to NYU when we had a Bronx campus. And so I'm very familiar with the Bronx. And we had a lot of stores in the Bronx. We had a lot of employees in the Bronx. We have a lot of real estate in the Bronx. So all the people that live here know me. And I've been to a lot of Bronx events. And they know that when there are business problems or there are community problems, that I feel their pain because I am one of them.
Is the city of New York tired of having a businessman in City Hall? You know, in the Bronx, the feeling certainly has been that mayor's development priorities around Yankee Stadium, and we have this boondoggle of a filtration plant that we've had. The effort to build luxury housing in Manhattan have been in stark contrast to the lack of investment in public housing and affordable housing initiatives. Why would Bronxites want another CEO, the CEO of Gristedes, to be in City Hall?
Well, I'm in many businesses. I'm not just... Gristedes only represents a small percentage of our sales. Because the whole country went through a depression, a recession. In New York, we went through a hiccup. And it's because there was confidence in Bloomberg, confidence in Ray Kelly as police commissioner, and tens of billions of dollars came into New York from Europe, where they didn't even trust their own currency, from Russia, from everywhere. This is the world city, and we have to have confidence in the number one guy and number two guy, because otherwise that money stops, then guess what? Our economy goes down, and no matter where you live in the 5 boroughs, you're going to feel it.
Do you think that the mayor has done a good job at keeping his promises to fixing the economy in the Bronx? That was what he ran on his third term. The whole idea was you need like you're saying, a businessman, somebody who really understands the economy. When it's clear that disparities of income disparities are just as wide, if not wider, than they've ever been in this city. Has he really done a good job for the working New Yorkers to build their profile as a businessman and as mayor?
It's a lot worse in other cities. That's what we got to get across to our people. I went through a discussion in Harlem last Saturday, and people wanted to stop certain programs that the police department is doing. And I said, look, we have, in Chicago, there's 20 murders for every 100,000 people. You know what New York is? 5. And I turned around to my opponents and I said, what do you want to do? You want to turn this into Chicago? Let's keep our citizens safe. Let's keep our economy going. The rest of the country was devastated the last few years. We survived.
I do definitely want to go back to, in essence, you're suggesting that, we talk about stop and frisk and those policies, and I want to finish a little bit on the business side.
Sure.
Then we'll get to that. One of the biggest projects, maybe in the city, and one of the biggest controversies over the last couple of years was right down the block from here at the Kingsbridge Armory. Do you like what happened at the Kingsbridge Armory that pushed toward a living wage, a bill that many people in the Bronx were frustrated that was watered down, but that is at least conceptually the law, and now will turn the Armory into the Kingsbridge National High Center? Was that, number one, a good process, and number two, a good outcome?
Well, the thing about the living wage and increasing the minimum wage, and it's always a problem, because I as a person find it very hard that anybody can live on the minimum wage. And what I've suggested to Dean Skelos, our majority leader, that there should be a balance between people that are living at home and are younger than, pick an age, 22, 23, 24, where the old minimum wage takes precedent, versus somebody that wants to live on their own. The minimum wage should be much higher.
Well,
so what I'm saying,
how do you direct that?
You direct it by age, that if you're 16 and 17 years old and you're living with your mom, then the minimum wage could be X or whatever.
So you're talking about a graduated minimum wage based on age.
Yes. And that way we try to make the business people happy, and we try to make, when people try to live on their own, that we can get them more money.
It's an interesting, I hadn't heard this concept. Let's say there's an 18-year-old who's trying to work his way through college and does a really good job, and that person may be doing as good a job or a more important job and needs that money even more because he's supporting a family or do those kinds of things, as maybe an older person who doesn't quite need it as much. By defining it by his age, that would seem to me to be cutting that person. Cutting his
when
life
I
off,
went to work and I was going to NYU, I worked in a grocery store on the west side of Manhattan, and I was earning $1.10 an hour. And I was very, very much annoyed when I heard that the cashier was making $1.25 an hour, because I'm the one that was carrying all the crates of sodas out from the basement. It is what it is. We have to have a balance, and we have to have common sense. And one of the things, I've been a CEO for 44 years, making decisions for 44 years. We need a balanced program.
Sitting in that seat a couple of months ago, Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr., when I asked him about the Fresh Direct project in the South Bronx, he said 3 reasons why: jobs, jobs, and jobs. You are running on a campaign of jobs, but certainly the grocery store owners have come out against it, and you've come out against it.
Absolutely
what do you think?
not. That is ridiculous. We got the jobs. They're in Queens already. They will never go to New Jersey. They won't go to New Jersey because they don't want to wait 3 hours on the George Washington Bridge and pay a big toll to service Manhattan customers, which is their #1 destination for Fresh Direct. How come that the Mayor Bloomberg takes my tax money? In 44 years in the supermarket business, I have never gotten a tax break from New York City. How come they take my money that I paid in taxes and are feeding our competitors? They're taking the money from C-Towns and Associateds and all small business people. It's wrong.
Let me recraft it hypothetically. Let's say we give $130 million in subsidies to the Gristedes chain and say, you can expand in the Bronx. We maybe give you a plot of land, maybe that plot of land. You wouldn't say that was good for my business and you wouldn't take it?
First of all, they already have a location in New York. They're in Queens. Would I accept $130 million to move? I could say I don't like my store on 168th Street, and I want to move it to 170th Street. Why don't you give me $5 million? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any common sense at all. Something doesn't pass the smell test, and that's what it's all about.
Let's talk about business development on the other side. Now, people in the Bronx fought very hard with that Kingsbridge Armory and the Nick partners that are putting the National Ice Center to sign an historic community benefits agreement. More than 50% Bronx procurement, promises to support youth programming, wage standards, environmental initiatives. In future development, would you use this as a standard, as a base, and say, you know what, you want to develop in the Bronx? These are the kinds of things to give back to communities and support community initiatives?
I want to develop real programs, not make-believe programs.
You think that's
I want to bring in big companies that are going to be paying larger wages. I believe the Bronx could have a lot of a zone where we can build and attract bigger companies, internet companies, biotech companies. You know why? I'll follow that up. I believe in transit-oriented development. You know, we have a subway system that can't be replaced. I believe we take the existing subway system and build around it. We build more housing. We build more industry, because people can jump on that subway and get any place in the city they want.
The history of New York, certainly a development of the history, and certainly as it moved into the northern boroughs, was the city developed around the subways. Here's the question that I know many Bronx viewers are asking. You know what? We've had people say they're going to develop the Bronx, they're going to build more housing, but guess what? They're crummy landlords. They take advantage of the people who don't really have money and can't afford to do it, or they're going to gentrify our neighborhoods and build luxury homes, and we get pushed out and don't get the benefits anyway. How do you equalize the balance that you talked about?
I have talked to the real estate industry about it, and I firmly believe we need more middle-class housing. We need more affordable housing. I think we should when we upzone those areas, allow for larger floor area, and maybe go 60-20-20. 60% market, 20% middle class, 20% affordable. You know, they're both affordable. Affordable middle class, affordable.
You would, for example,
lower.
insist on that for anybody who is developing in the Bronx, say, this is the formula. If you want to develop in the Bronx, you have to do
Absolutely.
it this way.
Why? You know, if we're going to allow you right now, if you're only allowed to build 6 stories, 8 stories, and we say to them, we'll allow you, tell you what we're going to do. We'll allow you to build 16 stories. I mean, the air is cheap, you know, and especially if it's around subways.
Well, of course, then if you do that, you're going to have to deal with the parking situation and the service needs of
Let them provide
supermarkets and schools.
The other big item that I've been advocating, our existing park system, we want to do a foundation for every park in every borough that we can take money from developers and say, we'll let you put another 2 floors, pay us
Well, this is
$1
similar.
million into a foundation for XYZ Park.
This is similar to the community benefits agreement crafted at the Kingsbridge
But I want
Armory.
the money, I want a foundation that nobody else could touch for every park in our city. That way, we maintain those parks. And you know what that means? When you maintain beautiful parks, the housing around it will build itself up. The housing will build up itself around our train system, and the housing will build up around beautiful parks. And it just becomes natural.
Let's go back to
Comes back to common sense management.
let's go back to the conversation about stop and frisk and what has been a controversial program, to say the least. And you talked about, well, the numbers show that in essence it's working, so why change anything? Is there a cost to stop and frisk? And I'm talking about an important psychological and sociological cost of stopping and frisking people who are innocent people in large numbers, overwhelmingly large numbers.
Tell you what I'm going to do.
And then all of a sudden you change their point of view and their perspective on their own lives and on their productivity when they go to school and work and everything else.
Let me make 2 points. One point is a lot of professional politicians panic all the time. You have 12 people screaming and yelling on that corner, carrying pickets, stop, stop and frisk, stop, stop and frisk. And the professional politician says, oh my God, they're picketing. Let's go along with them. Meanwhile, I don't know what those people are doing. They're not going to their jobs, or et cetera, et cetera.
Well, maybe they've been harassed.
I am the one that goes to the neighborhoods, talks to the mothers and the fathers, and you know what they say? The people that actually don't have time to go picket because they are working and they're taking care of their kids. Let me tell you what they say. Those mothers and fathers say, thank you. Thank you for keeping the guns off the streets, because I want my 8-year-old, my 10-year-old, my 12-year-old to be safe when they're playing in the streets or in the playground, instead of having these hoodlums carrying their guns, going around shooting each other. They're scared. They are scared to take their guns out to the streets and then leave them home.
I've heard.
So I talk to those people, and mothers and fathers have told me that repeatedly.
I've heard mothers and fathers say that they're more scared of their kids going out and being harassed by police than they are about the crime.
Fine.
in
Let's
the
go out.
neighborhood.
Let's go out and do a referendum. Let's see how people really feel, instead of having the professional politicians.
Do you think it's an interesting suggestion? Do you think if that was done, that stop and frisk would then be
Well,
supported?
we took a poll. You ready for this?
Sure.
65-70% on Democrats and Republicans believe that the police department should continue to do what they're doing.
Could it be revised so that it's still an effective tactic, but people don't feel harassed?
Yes. I think we should improve the system. We should have better training for the police officers that we put in neighborhoods, number one. Number two, nobody can say to me why we don't give them the technology they are in the airports. Give them one of those magic wands so you don't have to feel up somebody and say, okay, let me see if and you never touch the person. I mean, you go through at the airport, so what's the difference? And number three, possibly, we have a camera system on, everything's technology these days, on the officer's hat or on his badge, that surveys the entire situation.
Well, they do that on road stops. I mean,
They do that on road stops, so there's a matter of precedent. But
Do you think the PBA would support that initiative?
Well, you know something? You go in a fork in the road. Let's see what we can do and negotiate the right deal. See, this is what I do that other people don't do. I'll sit in the same room and negotiate with both sides and try to come up with a common sense solution that works for all. Meanwhile, there's new technology coming in the next year or two, which our professional politicians don't even know about. The technology is they have a new system where they aim it at you and they can tell if you're carrying a gun, and I never touch you. I never question you.
Well, we certainly have that technology in airports. You can, they do wonderful work
Yes.
where they swipe your hands or things like that. They can tell what you've been touching and
Yeah.
things like that.
So we'll solve that problem eventually.
Let's talk about the empowerment of Bronx communities. We've had a phrase ever since Freddie Ferrer was borough president that said, "Don't dump on the Bronx." And I always thought it was a rather ironic theme for a borough. That, we have such a chip on our shoulders. The one thing we want is, please don't dump on us. Bronx communities have been inundated with social service facilities as providers and developers take advantage of the low cost of land and cheap labor in the Bronx. Community boards and groups are going crazy trying to fight these things so their communities can grow. How can we give them, or should we give them, a greater say in what goes into their communities and keep aggressive development at arm's length?
Let me just say one more thing. I have made an announcement that every borough, I'm going to have a deputy mayor in charge of every borough. That way...
Well, don't we have borough presidents? Much like
yeah, but they don't report to the mayor. You can't fire a borough president. You need somebody that's responsible, and I've gotten applause in every borough about this, that's responsible to City Hall to make sure the outer boroughs don't feel like they're second-class citizens.
Are we duplicating the borough presidents, or then do we have to revise the city charter and go back to the old way and give them a vote on the Board of Estimate like we used to have?
I just want to do the job right. I am not going to go back and say, oh, well, it's a do-pa-pa-pa-pa-pum. I want to do the job right, and I want our citizens to feel like they're not second-class citizens, and I want them to feel that that deputy mayor in charge of the Bronx or every other borough, that they'll make sure that the snow is picked up, the garbage is picked up, that they talk to every community, every ethnic group, every community board. That way we have direct contact, and they feel, and a deputy mayor, if he doesn't do his job right, he can get fired.
It's been talked about, that concept has been talked about in different ways, and that was that, the borough of Staten Island should secede from the city of New York. Are we really talking about 5 different cities? I mean,
No,
is that a
we're
direction
talking
we ought to
about
go?
5 different commanders, regional commanders of each borough that take care of the nitty-gritty stuff and report to the mayor.
I'm guessing, just this is the first time I've heard you say this, that the current borough presidents would say, thank goodness, give me some legislative authority, give me a chance to really, have input into City Hall, and I can manage my borough. I'm just saying, why duplicate a system?
I've been a leader, I've been a CEO for 44 years. Somebody has to be boss.
Let's talk education before we run out of time. A number of large high schools in the Bronx have been phased out and replaced with more smaller schools. What do you think of the small school movement? Would you continue with the trends of closing large schools like Lehman and Kennedy and Clinton?
Not necessarily, but we have to improve our school system. We have almost between 35 and 40% dropout rate. Somebody decided years ago that everybody should get an academic education. I've been advocating instead of having these people drop out or just fade away because they can't do the work, that they should have an option, and we should be able to give them a trade education, teach them how to be carpenters, electricians, plumbers, and these people make $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. Teach them a trade to make a living,
so
to
you would
join the middle
expand
class.
the notion of trade schools.
Yes. Give them the ability to be a member of the middle class, have 2 kids, have their own home, have a wife, and instead of dropping out and going to work for Burger King or McDonald's for $8 an hour, let's give them a chance to succeed. Don't forget, I came from 135th Street. I'm able to go back to those neighborhoods and say, you have a chance. You could make it too. And if they're entrepreneurs, guess what? They can hire 3 carpenters and 3 plumbers and become a small businessman.
Before we run out of time, there was one proposal I know that you've been running around the city talking about. It's on your website, and that's the idea of reviving the World's Fair concept.
I love it.
How do you do it? Give me the.
Well,
we're almost. We probably got about a minute. Talk about the structure, how you do it, how you pay for it, and what are the benefits.
I would do it in every borough, and connect the 5 boroughs and have a World's Fair in every borough connected with a riverboat through the river. And the theme would be New York, the 21st century. We bring in Microsoft and Dow Chemical and all the
privately
companies.
Funded.
They will pay for their own pavilions. And you know what the vision is? New York, the 21st century. Wouldn't your son or daughter or grandkids love to go there and experience what I experienced in '64 and said, wow, look at that. You know, picture phone in '64 at the AT&T Pavilion. I want to see what Microsoft wants to do in the 21st century.
Do those companies hire and pay a good rate, or do they simply use the Bronx labor force at low rates so that they can benefit and we continue the economic disparities in this city?
No, I believe those companies will pay a great wage where people can live.
I know that Jane has been putting up the website for your campaign, and John Katz and Motiti. We really appreciate you coming by. Unfortunately, all the candidates didn't feel like you do, but we appreciate you being here.
I'd love to talk to you. I'll come back anytime, and I enjoy being here.
Great.
Because I love the Bronx.
There you go. Thank you so much. Folks, if you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, you email them to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com or post them on our Facebook page. We'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Of course, you should become a fan of Bronx Talk on Facebook. I know Mr. Katz and Motiti will do that right after the show. Make a note, our final mayoral candidate appearance will be 2 weeks from tonight on July 22nd. Public Advocate Bill de Blasio will join us on that night. And then mark it down for 6 straight Mondays, beginning July 29th, straight through primary day, we will present an unprecedented series of political debates. We'll give you a chance to hear from the candidates in the 8th, 11th, 15th, 16th, and 17th Council District Democratic primaries, as well as the election in the 86th Assembly District, giving you a chance to be better informed about the Bronx. That's Bronx Talk for almost 19 years. Thanks to producer Jane Filoro, director Shirley Arrieta, studio coordinator is Dina Valentine, and the cast of thousands who are around us behind the scenes, and to you. Good night. See you next week.
Sir, are you okay?